Hello. Michael and I are about to present Pope Gregory VII, his struggle and legacy. As Michael is not studying for a new career, he selected an academic subject based on his interest. We will tell you about Pope Gregory, try to give you a brief overview of his accomplishments, and perhaps figure out why we still remember the man who lived almost exactly 1 millennium ago. We hope you enjoy it. In the Italian city of Salerno, there is a cathedral. Within its walls there is a tomb. A wax effigy of a man dressed in a papal robe lies in the glass sarcophagus. The inscription in Latin says, "I have loved justice and hated iniquity. Therefore I die in exile." This is the resting place of Hildebrand, a pope, a saint, and a man who history remembers as Pope Gregory VII. There is no controversy that he was a great pope. Historians pause to reflect on his papacy. Some, like Blumenthal, call him a saint, a martyr, a genius. Others, like Cantor, stress the divisive nature of his reforms. We probably should go with the estimation by Frazee. He impassionedly remarks that Gregory gave his name to the whole era in church history, Gregorian era. And the entire succession of popes after him are now called Gregorian popes. Let us examine why. Let us take a look at his time. 5 centuries earlier, the great Rome has fallen. Europe was ravaged by wars. They were waged by barbarian warlords, who tried to establish their kingdoms. Frankish kings succeeded in creating the empire, which was then divided between their descendants. Europe was a continent with few shaky monarchies, which were constantly challenged by the barons. Economy was agrarian and very weak. The greatest historian of the 20th century, Arnold Toynbee, explains that church was the chrysalis out of which Western civilization emerged. Church saved and transferred to young Western civilization all the greatest achievements of Rome, such as administration, laws, literacy, and culture. It was church that stood like a rock amidst the turmoil of early medieval centuries. In the year of 529 AD, a man we now call Saint Benedict founded the first monastic order. Its members, called monks, were supposed to intermingle with the population and to bring the word of Christ to the masses. Benedict believed that proper life is lived when a monk spends a third of it sleeping, the other third working on land, and the third serving God. Toynbee states that this philosophy made black monks an integral and crucial part of early medieval society. Monks worked on land with their own hands, but they also organized and oversaw various building and agricultural projects. Kings and dukes relied on monasteries for providing them with knights and other military personnel. Monks performed administrative duties at their courts. Many of them were inducted into nobility. Monasteries became centers of literacy that preserved for future generations literary accomplishments of classical period. As a result, secular and canonical authorities came to mutually beneficial cooperation. Kings and dukes received many services from monasteries. They also received from clerics the endorsement as a divinely anointed powers. In response, monasteries received large grants of land, titles, and money. On a personal level, monks became friends and confidants of kings and dukes. Therefore, they became politically influential. Such a rise in wealth and power could not avoid causing envy. We can say that church and state came to happy equilibrium. Unfortunately, equilibriums don't last for a long time. By the middle of the 11th century, the equilibrium became shaky. Kings and dukes increased in their power over barons. They could rely on other sources in providing them with military and administrative personnel. They no longer needed monks. Slowly, monasteries lost crown's favor. To this stage, history brought Hildebrand. He was a former monk, a passionate and popular individual. When he was a cardinal, his popularity grew so much that the entire procedure of the selection of a new pope was bypassed. During the funeral of his predecessor, the crowd grew so agitated demanding his election that he was elected by acclamation. To us, he is described as a passionate and extraordinary individual who cared for justice. But we will try to find out if there were practical reasons for Gregory to act the way he did. We know well, if there is a practical gain, there probably lies the real reason for action. And in doing so, we will make our own impression about the man. Both etchings in this slide depict Pope Gregory. On the left, he is serving a mass, while the divine inspiration descends upon him in the form of a dove. On the right, a shrewd politician stares into our eyes while contemplating his next move. Let's move on. In his letters, the word that he used most often was the word justitia. It means righteousness. In his mind, righteousness was the kind of devotion to God that should have preceded profit in the earthly dealings of men. And as the direct successor of Saint Peter, Pope was the highest authority who could interpret what righteousness meant. Therefore, out of the blue, Gregory launched his attack on the shaky equilibrium that existed between the Church and European crowns. Gregory's offensive advanced along three lines, namely, simony, clerical celibacy, and investiture. I will explain as we move along. Before Gregory, clergy was allowed to marry. Church wasn't thrilled, but tolerated it. On the other hand, by the time Gregory arrived on the stage, church as a whole, and individual clerics, amassed great wealth. When clerics died, that wealth was inherited by their families. Therefore, it was channeled away from the church. If clerics remained celibate, church would inherit all of it. And Gregory acted. He relied on old spiritual texts and on the examples of fathers of the church and Christ himself. He declared even existing marriages among clergy illegal and invalid. Was it done for the love of God or for the love of money? But the struggle for the celibacy meant nothing in comparison with the fight that broke out over the issues of simony and particularly the investiture. This is what was happening. The crowned king or duke would give the church land and money. The cathedral, built upon that land, required canonical staff, as we would put it today. Being the primary investor, the king would personally appoint the bishop, or, in the proper terms, invest him with the canonical authority over the see. It was the king, and not the pope, who controlled key positions in church's hierarchy. Gregory meant to challenge that. Today we call it investiture controversy. After investiture, came simony. Simony was a practice of selling canonical posts. History knows not only bishops, but a pope, who bought their positions outright. Dante, in his Inferno, sent another pope to hell on the accusation of simony. So, not only Pope could not control the nominations of bishops, the offices ran wild, since they were for sale. Gregory did not like that. And the struggle was on. It brought Gregory on a collision course with another great historical personality, the Emperor of Holy Roman Empire, Henry IV. Henry was reluctant to submit to papal offensive. Therefore he resisted. In the course of this struggle, something unimaginable happened. Excommunication is the most severe punishment that can be inflicted by the Church. An excommunicated person loses his right to receive certain sacraments. It suggests that the person is seriously guilty before the Holy Church. Only the act of repentance can restore the person to his place among faithful. It is a very bad thing to be excommunicated. Popes before Gregory used this form of punishment many times. But never did they excommunicate a prince of the highest rank. Gregory had guts to excommunicate Henry. And not once, but twice. First time, he won, and Henry repented. Second time Henry counterattacked, and he lost. Gregory had to flee Rome, and he died in the remote city of Salerno. It is not the goal of this presentation to give a thorough account of the events of those days. Rather, we would like to give you a general assessment of Gregory's role in history. Let's try to do just that. His defeat did not deter his successors from continuing his reforms. As it was mentioned before, those popes who continued his work are now called Gregorian popes. Moreover, the entire period in the history of Church is called Gregorian. Clerical celibacy was prohibited, and remains prohibited, to this day. Simony was outlawed, and is still outlawed today. Investiture of ecclesiastical appointees is exclusively in the hands of Church. It seems that Gregory's personal defeat was followed by the overwhelming success of his cause. But that is not all. Please read the short excerpt from Whitney. It is not a coincidence that the word democracy appeared in the same sentence with the name of the Pope, who lived 1,000 years ago. By using his spiritual investiture and canonical power against monarchy, Gregory showed to the entire world that monarchs, like everyone else, are subjects to the highest authority, and therefore can be challenged. Popes excommunicated them right and left. Eventually, nobles limited king's power. Following their suit, people restricted the power of nobles. As a result, today we reach the democratic form of government. If our conclusion seems far-fetching to you, then consider the history of Eastern Christendom. That part of the world received its baptism from Byzantium. In Constantinople, the head of the Church was emperor's subject. All nations, christened by Constantinople, inherited this form of relationship between church and state. Toynbee says that when political, economic, and spiritual life of the nation rests in the same hands, the conditions are set for totalitarian government. You are looking at some of the most brutal dictators. All of them are from the Eastern Christendom, where people never learned to challenge their leaders. In the West, they did. And the person who gave them their first lesson was Hildebrand, or His Holiness Pope Gregory VII. Thanks for watching and listening. Goodbye.